Snow fell in thick, silent flakes over the suburban landscape, painting a picture of festive tranquility that was entirely at odds with the storm brewing inside Elena's heart. To the neighbors, she was the quiet woman in 4B who wore oversized sweaters and drove a decade-old sedan. To the staff at SwiftStream Logistics, she was just another disgruntled customer waiting for a late package. But Elena held a secret that would freeze the blood of every executive in the city if they knew the truth. She wasn't just a customer. She was the architect of the very infrastructure they used to exploit the common person. This Christmas, she had decided to step away from the glass towers of Manhattan to spend a quiet holiday in her hometown, operating under a pseudonym to see how her company truly treated the people who kept it alive. What she found was a rot so deep, it threatened to destroy the legacy her father had built. The package in question wasn't just any delivery. It was a delicate, hand-carved mahogany music box, a replica of the one her mother had lost years ago, intended to be the centerpiece of her father's final Christmas. It was priceless, fragile, and marked with every urgent and fragile sticker in the catalog. Elena had tracked its progress with a growing sense of dread. For 3 days, it had sat in the local distribution center, scanned and rescanned by a manager named Marcus, who was notorious for his arrogance. Marcus believed that power was something to be used as a blunt instrument, especially against those he deemed beneath him. He didn't know that the woman calling the help desk every 4 hours was the woman who signed his bonus checks. He only saw a nuisance, a voice on the other end of the line that needed to be taught a lesson in humility. On the morning of December 23rd, the lesson arrived. Elena stood by her frosted window, watching the SwiftStream van skid to a halt in her driveway. The driver, a man named Jax, who shared Marcus's penchant for cruelty, didn't even bother to walk to the porch. From the warmth of her living room, Elena watched in horror as Jax stood at the back of the van, laughing into his headset. He held the mahogany box, clearly identified by its unique packaging, and began to toss it into the air like a common football. Elena's breath hitched. She saw the box collide with the icy pavement, the sound of splintering wood muffled by the snow, but echoing in her soul. Jax didn't stop there. He kicked the box toward the porch, leaving a trail of debris across the stairs. Elena opened the door just as Jax was turning to leave. The cold air hit her face, but the fire in her veins kept her warm. She looked at the mangled remains of her mother's memory, and then at the man who had done it. Jax smirked, his eyes scanning Elena's modest attire with visible contempt. He didn't see a billionaire, he saw a target. He told her that if she wanted better service, she should have paid for the gold tier, a premium service that Marcus had been illegally upselling to pocket the commissions. Elena reached down and picked up a shard of the mahogany. Her fingers trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of the reckoning she was about to unleash. She asked him for his name and his supervisor's contact information. Jax laughed, a harsh, grating sound that cut through the Christmas carols playing from a neighbor's house. He told her his name was the King of the Road, and that his supervisor, Marcus, didn't talk to bottom feeders. The humiliation was calculated. Marcus and Jax had a game they played during the holidays, package roulette. They targeted customers who seemed unlikely to fight back, damaging their goods, and then forcing them through a labyrinth of red tape to claim insurance, often skimming the payouts through a shell company. They thought Elena was the perfect victim, a lonely woman in a small apartment with no connections and no recourse. They didn't realize they were playing roulette with a loaded gun pointed at their own heads. Elena retreated inside, the broken music box held against her chest. She sat at her old wooden desk and opened her laptop. The screen flickered to life, revealing the internal mainframe of SwiftStream Global. With a few keystrokes, she bypassed the regional firewalls. She watched the GPS coordinates of Jax's van move to the next victim. She watched Marcus's private messages on the company server, reading his jokes about the crying lady in 4B. The rage was a cold, sharp thing now. Elena knew that a simple firing wasn't enough. These men had turned the season of giving into a season of theft and cruelty. They had used her own creation to hurt people. She began to draft a series of special instructions for the upcoming company Christmas Gala, an event Marcus had been bragging about for months. He expected a promotion. He expected a seat at the table with the elite. Elena was going to give him exactly what he wanted: a seat at the table, right before she pulled the rug out from under it. She contacted her head of security, a man who knew her true identity and remained her only confidant in the corporate world. Her instructions were simple: gather every piece of evidence, the skimming, the intentional damage, the verbal abuse. I want a dossier that leaves no room for escape, and prepare my dress for the gala. Not the CEO dress, the victim's dress. As the sun set on the 23rd, Elena sat in the dark, the only light coming from the twinkling tree in the corner. She looked at the broken music box and whispered a promise to her mother's memory. The world saw a woman who had been stepped on, a customer whose Christmas had been ruined by the indifference of a giant corporation. But the giant was her. The corporation was her. And the hand that had crushed the box was about to feel the weight of the entire world falling on it. The holiday lights outside flickered, reflecting in her eyes like the cold stars above. Marcus and Jax were celebrating their victories tonight, drinking expensive scotch bought with stolen insurance money. They thought they were the masters of the winter. They had no idea that the ice was already cracking beneath their feet, and the person who owned the frozen lake was ready to let them sink. The morning of December 24th arrived with a deceptive brilliance, the sun reflecting off the fresh snow with a blinding intensity. Inside the regional headquarters of SwiftStream Logistics, the atmosphere was electric with self-congratulation. Marcus paced his corner office, adjusting his silk tie and admiring the view. He had spent the morning reviewing the shrinkage reports, the euphemism he used for the packages he and Jax had intentionally redirected or damaged to trigger insurance fraud. The numbers were staggering. This had been their most profitable Christmas yet. In his mind, he was already halfway to a vice presidency. He viewed the people of this town as mere statistics, cattle to be milked for every cent of holiday cheer. When his secretary buzzed him to report another complaint from the woman in 4B, Marcus let out a sharp, mocking bark of laughter. He told her to put the call on speakerphone so he could enjoy the sound of desperation. Elena's voice came through the line, sounding intentionally frail and defeated. She asked about the claim for her destroyed music box, mentioning how much it meant to her family. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, a predatory grin spreading across his face. He didn't just want her money, he wanted her to feel small. He told her that according to the driver's report, the package had been delivered in pristine condition, and that any damage must have occurred after it left their hands. He suggested she was trying to commit fraud against a multi-billion-dollar entity. He went further, mocking the cheap trinket she was so upset about, telling her that people of her stature should learn to be grateful for what they have rather than bothering busy men with trivialities. He ended the call by threatening her with legal action if she contacted the office again. He felt invincible, a king in a kingdom built on cardboard boxes and broken promises. What Marcus didn't see was Elena sitting in a stark, high-tech command center 10 miles away. The small apartment had been a tactical choice, but her true base of operations was a secure facility she owned under a holding company. She listened to the recording of the call, her face a mask of granite. Beside her, her head of security, Sarah, was uploading gigabytes of data. They had everything. The dashcam footage from Jax's van showing him kicking the box, the internal logs showing Marcus manually overriding the fragile alerts, and the bank records of the shell company where the insurance payouts were being funneled. It was a masterpiece of corruption, and Marcus had signed his name to every page. Elena instructed Sarah to ensure that every employee at the regional branch received an anonymous holiday bonus notification, one that would require them to attend the Christmas Eve gala to claim. She wanted a full house for the performance of a lifetime. As the afternoon faded into a bruised purple twilight, Elena began her transformation. She didn't put on the diamonds or the designer gowns that usually defined her public image. Instead, she chose a simple, slightly worn coat and the same sweater she had worn when Jax humiliated her. She wanted to be the ghost of the victim they thought they had buried. She spent the hours before the gala reviewing the guest list. It was a who's who of the local elite. Politicians Marcus had bribed, vendors he had squeezed, and the honest employees who lived in fear of his temper. This wasn't just about a music box anymore. It was about the integrity of the empire she had built. SwiftStream was supposed to be a bridge between people, a way to bring families together through the delivery of gifts and memories. Marcus had turned it into a wall of arrogance and greed. The gala was held at the Grand Winter Hall, a sprawling Victorian estate decorated with thousands of white lights and towering spruce trees. The air was thick with the scent of pine and expensive perfume. Marcus was in his element, holding a glass of champagne and holding court near the fireplace. Jack stood nearby, looking uncomfortable in a rented tuxedo, but basking in the reflected glory of his boss. They were laughing about the music box lady, retelling the story of the delivery to a group of sycophantic middle managers. Marcus called it the highlight of his season, a perfect example of how to handle the entitled poor. He had no idea that the entitled poor was currently standing in the shadows of the balcony, watching him through the lens of a security camera that fed directly to her tablet. Elena felt a strange sense of calm as the clock ticked toward midnight. The humiliation she had endured, the sneers, the insults, the physical destruction of her mother's gift was the fuel for the fire she was about to light. She watched as Marcus took the stage for his State of the Region speech. He spoke about excellence, reliability, and the SwiftStream family. It was a masterclass in hypocrisy. He even had the audacity to mention the importance of the holiday spirit. Elena signaled Sarah. It was time. She began her walk toward the main floor, moving through the crowd like a silent specter. People turned to look at her, confused by her plain appearance in a room full of sequins and silk. She ignored them, her eyes locked on Marcus, who was now mid-sentence, boasting about the record-breaking profits his branch had generated. As Elena reached the foot of the stage, Marcus finally noticed her. His speech faltered for a fraction of a second, his eyes widening in a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. He couldn't believe this nobody had managed to get past security. He signaled for the guards to remove her, a smug smile returning to his face. He thought this was the final act of her desperation, a pathetic attempt at a public plea. He leaned into the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it seems we have a gatecrasher, a confused woman who thinks a logistics company is a charity. Guards, please escort this lady back to her apartment in 4B. I believe she has some broken toys to cry over." The room erupted in cruel, stifled titters. Jax laughed the loudest, pointing at Elena's shoes. Elena didn't move. She didn't look at the guards. She looked at the giant screen behind Marcus, which was currently displaying the SwiftStream logo. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, encrypted remote. "Marcus," she said, her voice low but carrying an authority that silenced the room. "You once told me that you don't talk to bottom feeders. You told me that power is about who can break things without consequence." Marcus sneered, stepping toward the edge of the stage. "I don't know how you got in here, lady, but you're about to find out what real power looks like. You're finished. I'll make sure you never receive a letter in this town again." Elena smiled, a cold, sharp movement of her lips. "Actually, Marcus, I'm the one who decides who is finished. And as for real power, you've been using mine to fund your crimes. It's time I took it back." She pressed the button on the remote, and the screen behind Marcus flickered, turning from the company logo to a live feed of his private bank accounts. The silence that descended upon the grand winter hall was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket that snuffed out the festive music and the clinking of glasses. On the massive digital screen, the inner sanctum of Marcus's corruption was laid bare in glowing blue numbers. It wasn't just a bank account, it was a ledger of betrayal. The names of every customer he had defrauded, the exact amounts skimmed from the insurance payouts, and the offshore account where he and Jax had been hiding the spoils of their package roulette game. Marcus froze, his face draining of color until he matched the white lilies on the banquet tables. He looked at the screen, then at the woman standing before him, and for the first time, he saw past the simple sweater and the modest coat. He saw the predator that had been watching him from the shadows of his own empire. "What is this? This is a hack! Security! Shut it down!" Marcus screamed, his voice cracking with a desperation that bordered on hysteria. But the security team didn't move. They stood at the exits, their arms crossed, looking not at Marcus, but at Elena. Sarah, the head of global security, stepped out from the wings of the stage, holding a tablet that mirrored the display. She gave a single sharp nod to Elena. The trap had closed. Elena stepped up onto the stage, her presence expanding to fill the room until she seemed to dwarf the man who had mocked her only moments ago. She didn't need a microphone. Her voice was a cold blade that cut through the frozen air. "My name is Elena Thorne," she said, and the name rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. The elites in the front row gasped, some even standing up in instinctive respect. Thorne was the name on the building. Thorne was the name on the planes, the ships, and the trucks that moved the world's commerce. She was the Iron Maiden of Logistics, a woman who had built a trillion-dollar legacy from nothing. Marcus stumbled back, hitting the podium with a dull thud. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. Jax, who had been laughing at the back of the room, tried to slip toward the service entrance, only to find two of Elena's personal agents blocking his path. The king of the road looked like a cornered rat. "You thought I was a victim, Marcus," Elena continued, her eyes locked on his with a terrifying intensity. "You thought that because I didn't scream, I was weak. You thought that because I wore a sweater instead of a suit, I was someone you could discard like the trash you leave on people's porches. But you forgot the first rule of the empire I built. Every package matters. Because every package represents a person's trust." She pointed a finger at the screen, where a video began to play. It was the dashcam footage of Jax kicking the mahogany music box, followed by the audio of Marcus mocking Elena's frail voice. The guests watched in horror as the true nature of the men they had been toasted was revealed. The holiday spirit Marcus had preached about was exposed as a rotting carcass of greed. Elena turned to the crowd, her voice softening but losing none of its edge. "Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of our success, but there is no success without integrity. Marcus, you didn't just break a music box. You broke the promise this company makes to every grandmother sending a gift, every child waiting for a miracle, and every employee who works honestly in the cold while you sit in your heated office stealing their bonuses." She turned back to Marcus, who was now trembling so violently his teeth were chattering. "As of 11:58 p.m. on Christmas Eve, you are not only terminated for cause, you are being held civilly and criminally liable for every cent you stole. The police are waiting in the foyer, and since you love gold tier service so much, I've made sure they've brought the highest quality steel handcuffs for you and your driver." The doors of the hall swung open, and the local authorities marched in, their uniforms stark against the holiday decor. They moved with purpose, bypassing the stunned guests and heading straight for the stage. As the cuffs clicked shut around Marcus's wrists, the crowd, those who hadn't been complicit in his schemes, began to applaud. It started as a low murmur and grew into a deafening roar of vindication. The honest warehouse workers and delivery drivers, who had been forced to attend to claim their bonuses, realized that their real boss had finally come home to clean house. Elena watched as Jax was led away, his face buried in his hands, stripped of the arrogance he had used as armor. Elena stood alone at the center of the stage as the chaos of the arrests subsided. She looked out at the room, her expression unreadable. "The bonuses you were promised tonight are real," she announced to the staff. "But they won't be coming from Marcus's budget. They will be coming from the recovered funds of his fraud, tripled as an apology from me for allowing this rot to persist under my name. And as for the woman in 4B," she paused, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. "She's going to spend her Christmas rebuilding what was broken. Because in this company, we don't just deliver packages, we deliver justice." As the clock struck midnight, signaling the start of Christmas Day, Elena walked off the stage. She didn't stay for the party. She walked out into the crisp midnight air, where the snow was still falling, pure and white, covering the tracks of the van that had brought so much misery. In her hand, she held the shard of mahogany she had kept in her pocket, a reminder of why she fought. The power had been inverted. The bully had been broken. And as the distant sound of church bells rang through the valley, the CEO of SwiftStream Logistics drove her old sedan back to apartment 4B, finally ready to enjoy the peace she had earned. The empire was safe, the traitors were unmasked, and for the first time in a long time, the holiday felt truly bright.